Hello and welcome. Just going to sort this out. Not quite sure why it's not working yet. Bear with me. Ta-da! There we go. Hello. My name's Liz. I'm from Underpin Change and Growth Consultants. We are a consultancy that helps organisations grow and adapt to changes that are happening in their industry, whether that be through increased sales, marketing, reorganisation, restructuring, all of that kind of stuff. Today I want to talk about something which is very close to my heart, which is social licensing. A lot of people don't know what that means. It could mean almost anything. It's one of those kind of jargony words. So we're going to break it down. We're going to find out why it's important, not just for big organisations, but for small organisations too. And then we're going to have a look at some examples and see where we go from there. So who am I? I'm a founder and lead consultant at Underpin Consultants. 17 years of experience in marketing and business. My core values: curiosity, equity, which is different than equality. Equity is giving people what they need. Equality is treating everybody the same. And positive change. So we're interested in making a good fist of trying to change the world and do good things for good people. So I am dedicated to supporting sustainable business growth and impact. So that's no quick rich schemes. You never hear me talking about, hacks or crypto or blockchain or any of those kind of good stuff. This is about creating a world that is kind of sustainable and helpful to businesses. So let's get started. So today we're going to talk about social licensing, why it matters more than ever, the difference between formal licenses and social licenses, and what businesses risk by ignoring stakeholder trust. All of that is at the moment a little bit cloudy and opaque, but the aim of this is to kind of freshen it up, shine a light, and see where we get to. So first question you're probably all asking is, what is a social license? So what a license is something that allows you to do something. So, for example, a really good version of that is James Bond's License to Kill. So he has probably a written down piece of paper somewhere that says, as part of his job, he can use lethal force. That is a license. You can have a wedding license that says, or a marriage license that says, I am married. So it is permission to do something. And there are usually two types of licensing. First one is formal licensing, which we will go through in a little while. That is, I need a permit to have a market stall, or I want to dig in a certain place, so I need to get legal permission from the local council. Those are the licenses. There are some license to hold an event, a license to sell beer, a license to do lots of different things. So it's a formal thing that if you don't have, you are breaking the law or certain local jurisdictions, and you can get fined and potentially put in prison, depending on how difficult it is. And it's a kind of formal structure. What social licensing is something that sits alongside that. And it's an ongoing acceptance and approval from communities and stakeholders. And what that means is that when you go into somewhere, just because you have a piece of paper that says you can do something, for example, dig a hole in the road, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have permission from the local community. Now, what a lot of conservative, and I mean that with a small c, or kind of business owners will say is, well, I don't need to get permission from the local people. I know what's right. I know what I'm doing, and it's for the greater good, and we're gonna make people's lives better. And then what usually happens is you usually get an absolute uproar. You get people forming groups on Facebook. You get public inquiries. You get all of that kind of stuff. And what that leads to is an awful lot of issues and challenges and ill will and wider PR kind of meltdowns and disasters. And so the key concept of a social license is it's an unwritten social contract. There's no formal application, there's no formal legals, but it is an essential part of project success, because what it does is it brings the community that you're working in together. Example of this would be, I want to put a small hydroelectric dam on the river near my house. To do that, we're going to need to dig up a bunch of fields, and we're going to have to make some disruption. There's going to be some noise disruption, all of that. Getting the local community, getting the people who live nearby to understand why it is they're doing, what the benefits are, but also including them in what kind of mitigations, what kind of diversions, what kind of things do they put in place that will enable that project to run smoothly and not be protested or challenged in the courts. And that's what a social license is. So why does social licensing matter? Not just for companies, and we're not talking about companies only today, and we've done that a couple of times in the past. We're talking about councils, local community groups, we're talking about charities. Everybody needs social licensing. So if you're a company, you might need social licensing because you want to work within the community. If you are a council, you may want to impose changes on people. For example, you want to start charging for green bins, which happened in my local area a few years ago. You want to transform a park into housing. You want to transform housing into a park. You need to have a license from the local community if you're a local council, because you want to get elected again. You want to be able to do things quickly. You want to be able to create a world where you can do the things that you think are right. And the way you do that is by getting the community, getting the local people on board. From a charity point of view, that is, we want to come in and start working with homeless people or people from certain disadvantaged backgrounds. You need a license to work with them, and that's about trust and creation, all of that. So let's have a run through why social licensing matters to all of those groups. The first one is we want to stay ahead of legislation. So at the moment, there is a lot of rollback on environmental protection and business protection, but that will come back, in my opinion, and you should always be ahead of the game. So when people are coming in and say we need to be building 1.5 million houses, let's take that for an example, and they're about to build thousands of houses in Peterborough, and they're building thousands of houses around here in South Cambridgeshire. You need to have the people on board to say, yes, we understand why these houses are being built. This is the way we want to build. These are the kind of amenities, the kind of social license to do all of those things. And you don't want to be adhering just to the local ordinances or the laws that are being passed today. You want to make sure that it's robust enough that anything that happens over the next 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 years, some of these projects are humongous, lasting 60, 70 years, that you are meeting the social environmental expectations, because a social license is about the community, how it feels, what it's going to do. So things like the demography, the people who are actually living in the place, is going to change. For example, where I live is an old rural community. They're now building a lot of houses on brown belt and green belt land. And so the people who are coming in to my town are going to have a completely different background than the people who have lived here for the last 70, 80 years. And so understanding what legislation means from people and who you're going to be speaking to, that's a key part of long-term strategy and planning. It builds community trust. So if you want to do something else, if you want to do something different, if you want to do something that's controversial, you need to establish the relationships through transparency and accountability. One of the things that we like to do when we're doing social licensing is find the strongest voices. So those who are most opposed, those who are most worried or concerned about whatever it is, the project that we're trying to deliver. We then work with them to understand what their concerns are, to capture those concerns, and to be able to then be as honest as we can with them to say, this is what we're planning to do. We want to bring you along. How can we help? And what you're doing is you're creating an accountability for the community, as well as the people who are running that project, to, whether it be a company, whether it be a local council, to say we're working together to create community assets. What do they get for this? What are the benefits for this? So there's an education and there's a communication side of things. But by having people on board early and understanding what their objections are and working with them to create an accountability and transparency within businesses and within the communities together, so we can all work on them. And one of the great examples of this is if you look at the energy sector, community-owned, community participated energy projects, small modular stuff in rural communities have a much better success rate from planning applications and challenges and all of that kind of stuff because they've involved the community. Having these large monstrous projects that span massive amounts of people are incredibly difficult to get your social licensing from because you are having such a massive impact. Now, I'm not advocating entirely for small modular because they're easier to get through, but I think there are models, I think there are systems, there are outreach and community frameworks that you can use, and you can look at how those are doing well and use them on larger projects. Reduces leases, delays and costs. I live very close to the Black Cat roundabout, and they are completely regenerating that. You've got solar panel farms, you've got lots of other things around here, you've got big housing estates going up, and they have been delayed and because it's been done from my perspective on a point of we're about to land an alien spaceship in the middle of the A1. It's going to take 5 years to complete. It's going to cost millions and millions of pounds. It's going to be incredibly loud and disruptive. This is what we're doing. And when I've been to these kind of things, both as an observer, but also as just a stakeholder within the local community, a lot of it is, this is what we're doing. There's nothing you can do about it. And we are only doing this because we've been legally obligated to do it. I've been to multiple ones of those. It's a box ticking exercise. And all it does is it informs people of how they can delay, how they can try and overturn, how they can complain, all of those things. And what you actually want those things to be is to be genuine participatory events, and you do that through things like gamification, where you create games where you are talking to them at a point before you get to the final plans, so you can turn around and say, well, we've spoken to the community, this is what we're doing. A lot of that doesn't happen, and what eventually happens, if you look at something like the Second Thames Crossing or other projects that have gone very far down the line and then been cancelled, the Garden Bridge, is it's done as a sort of, we're doing this and we don't care about the local community. And even if, the worst case scenario is you do that and you don't care. The second way is you kind of have this fake box ticking exercise. The best way to do it is to be genuine, honest and open. And it enhances your reputation. We're working with the community. We want to help. When you come and do later projects, you can turn around and say, this is the process that we do. You can develop innovative processing. And that's really good too. And what you then become is a part of the community, and the community is more likely to license you in the future to be able to do things that you want to do as a business, as a council, as a charity, or whoever it is that you want to be. So how do we do it? As I said, we identify the stakeholders. We know who is impacted by our work. You would be surprised sometimes by how far that goes. Let's take the Black Cat roundabout regeneration and improvements. That actually influences people all the way to Milton Keynes, all the way over to Cambridge and much further beyond. If you look at the East-West Rail, which is a consultation I attended a few weeks ago, they are planning to bring. They were doing. It was really interesting, and I was really pleased to see it. But they were doing something in St Neots, which doesn't have a station. The nearest station is Tempsford, but they know that there will be an impact on it, and therefore a lot of people are turning around and say, well, extend the line here, extend the line there. And for them to explain why they can't do that is actually quite interesting. The next thing you need to do is you need to categorize stakeholders. You need to understand, what their influence is, what their interest is, what their expectations, what they want, what they don't want. You need to ask the right questions. There are lots of different methodologies of how you do that. One of the things that we're working on at the moment is people-to-people interviewing. So rather than a person like me coming into a community and saying, what is it that you want from this? We allow stakeholders to talk to themselves. So the landowner talks to the people who are going to be living there, we let the council talk directly to its stakeholders rather than having these kind of evaluators come in and do what is usually a right job, but do a better job by encouraging the community to look at themselves and see how that works. Bring in the right people. We do diverse, inclusive engagement. You don't want, people who are seen as standoffish, or people who are condescending or patronizing. That's a really important thing to think about as well. And we need to set standards together, so we let communities define what's acceptable. And there will obviously be decisions where you have to kind of turn around and go, no, this needs to be done. Here are the reasons why it needs to be done. We are going to move forward with this. We want to make sure that we're doing this in the best way we can. We will have to make tough decisions. We will have to do things that you don't like, but let's talk about it and see and listen genuinely about what it is that we want to do. So, engagement strategies that work, being transparent, open, honest. Why are we asking you this? We've got a £600 million contract. We want to get this and we want to deliver it properly. I think people can over-egg things sometimes, trying to go about the benefits, in a really community-focused way. And yes, that's great, but I think you have to deliver the benefits and the concerns and the negatives. You have to be open. You have to report back to them quickly. So that's, information capture. We had this conversation this week. This is what we're doing next week. This is what we're doing in 3 weeks. This is how your thoughts have changed our situation. We're going to have a different kinds of accountability now. Giving credit where credit is due. We're doing this because we are trying to, we have seen the concerns of local residents in this particular part of the county, and therefore we are going to do this, and here's why. And that, again, that open communication, that transparency is a really useful part of getting projects further down the line and bringing in that community spirit and that collective responsibility. Again, regular communications, not just a weekly or monthly, newsletter or something. Where are people? Is it TikTok? Is it local Facebook groups? Where are the people that you need to contact, and what is the easiest way of contacting them? Creating new levels of complexity is not always the best way of doing things. Going to where the stakeholders are and communicating to them effectively and constantly accepting feedback, that's the best way to do it. And surprisingly, things like Facebook groups and TikTok and all of that kind of way is the best way of delivering it. Two-way conversation, so not talking at you, we're talking together. Those two people at either end of the conversation doesn't necessarily have to be big bad company or big bad council, and it can be community activists wanting to find out more about what it is we're doing, people talking to people, those things being recorded on video, used, analysed. That's what it's about. It's not just us turning around and saying we're dumping this, giant new road on you and we don't care how you feel. It's about being two-way conversation. And be proactive. Identify the concerns. That can be a real difficult thing to do sometimes, because people will sound angry, people will sound outraged, people will say things that are aggressive and rude, and why not? Because they are, you are coming into their community and potentially doing something that they don't necessarily want. So it's about being compassionate, but we need to identify what their real concerns are, and that's by asking open questions. Why do you feel like this? What can we do instead? How can we work on this? This is our position. We understand your position. How can we come to a middle ground on this? And then address them. Be honest and open and compassionate about what you're trying to say and how you're trying to say it. So if someone shouts at you, I've been shouted at numerous times at engagement events, it's about accepting that, understanding why they are angry, and trying to have a genuine conversation. And I think if you respond to people with care and attention and empathy and love and say, listen, I understand where you're coming from. Happy to talk as long as possible. Tell me what it is that you care about. I want to understand, and I want to work out how we can work out a way out of this. That's a much better way than turning around and say, I don't care if you're angry or not. We're doing this. There's one way that's better than the other. So if you don't do social licensing, then you will inevitably spend infinite amounts of money on trying to get things through. There can be a public backlash. You can go to a point where people are marching on the streets or marching through London. You can have people, back in the 90s. I was at the Newbury bypass a few months ago, and one of my childhood memories is Swampy sitting in a tree for 4 and 5 months, years potentially, trying to get them out at HS2 at Euston. They have people underground and all of that kind of stuff. And so for me, there are people you can't talk to. I get that. Sometimes people have such strong views on these things, you never. But again, you have to make sure that you understand what the negative outcome is if you don't engage the public. Ignoring stakeholders creates operational risks. So, those delays create money. You might lose people. People might feel unsafe working for your organization. They might get disillusioned because they joined you as a council to do great work, and now they're not doing great work. They're now being shouted at. And so there's that. And short-term gains lead to long-term losses. If you build a road or you build a project and you force it through, when you have to come back to that community again, they will never forgive you. And if you are a charity, for example, and you don't have that stakeholder license and you don't have that stakeholder engagement and that permission, your long-term goal of changing the community in whichever way your charity wants to change the community is not going to happen unless you have a genuine positive connection to the community. And if you burn that early, then you burn you burn that completely, and then you don't have any kind of way to turn around and say, I'm not interested in talking to you ever again, and that can happen. So again, there are tons of real business mistakes that have happened. One really interesting one at the moment, and I'm going to try and be as apolitical about this as possible, is social licensing can also be the people who buy your business. And so let's take Tesla. Tesla is a company. They make electric cars, and people love their electric cars. And there is a stakeholder license that says, we want to protect the environment. We understand that electric cars are the best way to do that. Elon Musk is a visionary. He's building a company to transition the world to green technology. We buy into that. Over the last couple of years, what has happened, and again, trying to be as apolitical as possible, Elon Musk has shifted into more of a governmental role. He's shifted more right-wing, and he's shifted more pro-business, and he's shifted in a way that is cutting government. He's currently head of the Department for Government Efficiency. What you're seeing is that social contract, which is not, a legal contract that says I'm going to buy a Tesla every 3 years or whatever that might be. What you have now is a situation where that social contract between the customers who have a perception of we're green, we are cool, we're techie, we want to change the world, we're early adopters, we are, we're Tesla owners, and that's what we stand for, is now more and more at odds with the perceived ownership of Tesla, who is now this kind of right-wing, not particularly green, not particularly positive, governmental efficiency kind of person. And whether you agree with it or not, it is different than the core base of Tesla users and buyers. And so you have a situation now where stock is going down and people are returning their vehicles because they don't agree with what the management is doing. That social license has been eroded. And it's having a genuine impact on Tesla's stock and ability to make money and grow and do the things that it wants to do. And so a lot of people think that social license is something that is exclusively a public sector issue, or a private sector dealing with, public infrastructure. But actually, businesses every day have to work in the social contracts of their customers. And Tesla's a really great example at the moment of how a social license is being degraded by a mismatch in what the social part of the customer thinks and what the management is perceived to be doing. So What can we do to avoid the mistakes of bad social licensing or no social licensing at all? We don't engage stakeholders just to tick a box. We genuinely want their input. We genuinely understand that the more people we can get on this and the better people understand what we're trying to do on a project or with a charity or with a public sector organization, that we will improve the overall project. And that's the thing I strongly believe in. If you just go in there with a big hammer and say, I'm going to start whacking, but if you go in and say, listen, where's the best place to whack this hammer? And if I do whack this hammer, these are the consequences. Can you help me mitigate those consequences? You are an expert in this local area. How can we do that? What can we do? All of that kind of stuff. And when you go through the evaluation process, that's something you need to do as well. Did we whack this hammer in the right way? Who should we have spoken to make sure that we whack the hammer in the right area? All of those things are really important. And if you do them with genuine curiosity, and goodwill, and the idea that you don't have an exclusivity on good ideas, then you will have a better time and you will get a better project, you get better outcomes, and it will have a more sustainable and long-term growth. Don't ignore local concerns and values. Inner city values, inner city organizations will have different values than those in the countryside, brown belt, green belt, all of that kind of stuff. Understand who they are, and the way you understand who they are is by talking to them in a way that is designed to listen and not speak. Assuming one size fits all engagement strategies, if you're dealing with people from particular ethnic backgrounds, how do we communicate with them well? Well, we communicate with the language that they speak best. For example, if you're dealing with LGBTQ+, there are certain issues that they are facing that other demographics and other stakeholders aren't. So how do we bring that in? How do we create not a one size fits all? And for us at the moment, we're working on the idea that the community evaluates itself. So, bringing on people, bringing on custodians, people talking to each other, recording that, understanding that. That's what we're trying to do at the moment. Is it difficult? Yes. Are we trying to do it in a way that makes it less difficult? Of course. And then slow responses. Here's what we're doing. This is our update. This is where we want to go. No, we're not able to get it sorted yet, but when we do get it sorted, we will get it sorted. This is week 3. We plan to have it done by week 10. What's a great thing at the moment, actually, is they are currently putting down the A1 near where I live. They are putting sound baffling all the way down the side of the road, and there's a little sign that has a thermometer and it's a progress bar. And it says, this progress, we are currently 0, 25, 50, 75. And every now and again, someone colours a little bit in to say, this is how far we are done along. That is a great way of communicating, a really simple and really effective way of communicating customer feedback and customer response, and dealing with the mitigation of people getting irate that this thing never finishes. The problem is you need to make sure, and the reason why people don't do it is if you turn around and say this thing is 75% done, and then it takes another 6 weeks, you're holding yourself accountable to the community. So I think that's a really interesting way of dealing with slow responses, is have it public, have it transparent, have it immediate. And that's a great way of doing that. And don't just have it buried in some 90-page report. Make it easy, make it accessible, make it on social media, put it in places like the side of the road where people are actually going to be. So here are some helpful tips. Identify and map your stakeholders. Understand who's in the community, who's going to be affected, how big that map needs to be, how deep that map needs to be. Do we need to speak to old people? Do we need to speak to young people? Do we need to speak to people who commute to the area or commute through the area? Lots of different opportunities, to identify the right people. Categorize influence and interest levels. So, how much do they care? What, are they 3 feet away from the issue? Are they 40 feet away from the issue? Not just in a literal sense, but in an emotional sense, in a relationship sense, all of that kind of stuff. Ask insightful, respectful questions, and listen to the answers. Include missing voices actively. Young people are terribly difficult to get their opinions on. So how do we gamify it? How do we make it easy for them to do? How do we get to the places that they want to talk? How do we get them in a situation where they want to talk? How do we make them feel safe? How do we keep safeguarding? All of these kind of things. It's not easy, but it's worth doing. Co-create the standards with communities. Yes, completely. Communicate openly and regularly. We've already talked about that. Enable two-way conversations. Be fair and treat all stakeholders equally. And that's not necessarily in terms of equally taking on board their advice, because some people will be affected more, but it's about making sure that everybody is given the same opportunity and the equal opportunity. Think long term, not just be on one project phase. Monitor sentiment and adjust when needed. So, don't be aggressive, don't be rude. It's the famous "don't be a dick" thing. If you can be nice, choose to be nice, choose to be friendly, choose to be open. You never know what kind of information people will give you. Operate responsibly and ethically, and show people that you're doing that. And then when you say you're going to do something, do it. That's the key thing. So that's social licensing. It can be used in a multitude of different ways. Everybody needs it, and a lot of people have it without even knowing about it, and they can lose it for the exact same reason. So make sure that the community you're in, whether you're a coffee shop, whether you're a giant infrastructure project, whether you're a community charity trying to do something cool and uplift the local community, make sure you understand that you need and require the permission of the society and the community that you live in to do your best work. And the best way to have that is to listen and understand and engage. Thanks so much for listening. I really appreciate it. We'll be back again soon with another one. If you have any comments or anything particular you want me to go through, that's great. You feel free to comment in this video or any of the other videos that we produce on YouTube. Have a great